Hey guys, a couple of years ago, I started learning how to play legato technique, and it's had a huge impact on my playing. And it's actually kind of like my staple go-to technique at this point. And I just wanted to share with you guys three common mistakes that I feel like I've seen a lot of students of mine make, and actually things that I myself have done wrong and realized along the way that, hey, that's not working. So I'm going to go through them in the order of how I learned them. So the first one is one that I learned that I figured out like 2 years ago. And then as we go forward, the third one is actually something that I learned just this week that I figured out, and it has had a huge impact on my legato technique. So I'm excited to get to the end of this video and share that one with you guys. The first thing that I see a lot of people doing wrong is I see them practicing really, really fast, trying to play these really fast lines, and they mess them up, and then they try them over and over again, and then they sound clunky, and they're muting notes here and there, and rushing notes, and just it's not sounding perfect like it should. And they keep trying, and the answer is not to just keep trying fast, but actually to slow it down and work out the kinks really, really slow. And I feel like I tell people to practice slow a lot, but it doesn't really sink in until I demonstrate it. So I'm going to show you guys the type of thing I might be practicing. If you were in my room while I was practicing, you might hear a lot of stuff like this, really slow down, like. And then I'd do that probably like 100 times until it's just like begging me to go faster, like I almost can't help it but to let my fingers just go naturally, and they'd play that lick faster. And then I do that with other licks. But really very, very repetitive, slow practice. A student asked me the other week what I had been working on, and the answer, at least for that day, was I had this one lick that I'd been practicing, and I practiced it all day. I think I practiced it for like two hours or so, the same lick. I practiced it really slow, and then I got it faster and faster and faster until I could play it at the tempo that I wanted, and it sounded right, and it was clean. And that's basically what I do a lot of the time. I spend a lot of my time playing very repetitive lines over and over and over again until they sound good to me. So tip number one, pretty straightforward, practice slow. This goes for other areas of technique too, but I think it is never more true than with legato technique that I have never really fixed my mistakes or got stuff clean going fast. I get it clean slowly, and then I try to work it up to speed. And if I'm working it up to speed, at some point it gets not clean, then I slow back down a little bit and then get it clean, and then start trying to bring it up to speed and see if I can get it, and repeat that process until I get it as fast as I want. Okay, let's move on to number two. When I started learning legato, I got really into a couple of players who I thought had some of the best legato, and I was listening to them a lot, and I was stealing lines. One of those players was the guitar player from the UK, Tom Quayle, who I think has some of the best legato technique I've ever heard. Check out his YouTube page. I'll put a link in the description if you guys have never heard of him. I'm sure most of you have. But I was stealing all of these lines from Tom, and I was trying to work them up to speed, and I was practicing them slow and doing everything that I should have, and it just wasn't quite happening. I wasn't getting them fast enough, clean enough. It just wasn't sounding right. I wanted them to sound like when Tom plays them, and they really just weren't. It just wasn't happening. After a few weeks, I felt like I had put in the practice hours that at least something should have been happening that sounded right, and it wasn't. And what I did eventually is I was talking about it to a guitar player, another very well-known Legato technique guy, and I was telling him about this problem I was having, that it just wasn't happening, and I played him a couple of my examples of Tom's stuff that I was trying to steal, and he gave what I think is the best answer he possibly could have given me. What he told me was, you have your own hands with your own bone structure, with your own flesh, your own nails, your own personality, your own way of thinking, and other people's stuff might not work for you because they designed it for them. And it's true. Tom designed all of his lines. He has his own sound with his own lines that pretty much nobody else plays, and they work very well for him. He sounds amazing doing them, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't just steal his lines and get them to sound like that because they didn't work for my hands for whatever reason. One kind of example that I think is interesting is if you wiggle your fingers, everybody wiggles their fingers differently. So I think this is just kind of an example of how everybody has their movements that work very naturally, and it is best to find lines that work well for your fingers as opposed to someone else's. So this tip is basically throw out other people's stuff. Of course, I still steal other people's stuff sometimes, but I'm very quick to discard it if I feel like it's not going to work for my hands and it's not going to feel right. I've heard a lot of guitar players who steal lots of stuff, and they play like, they're guitar players who play Pat Martino licks over everything. And I always feel like those guys never sound like the real thing. They never, you can always tell when it's some guy impersonating Pat Martino or Mike Stern or Tom Quayle. The real deal always just sounds so authentic, so perfect. It just fits. It sounds so natural. And I think that natural sound is the sound of someone who has come up with stuff that fits them. It fits their hands and their personality and their way of playing. So what I did is I just started coming up with my own lines, just trying to find stuff that my fingers did easily. And when I started doing that, I saw a huge improvement in my playing. Like, immediately I started finding tons of stuff. And I realized that there's actually basically infinite stuff that you can play that works well for you. And when there's infinite stuff that works well for you, what's the point of trying to force someone else's thing that's not working as well when you could just find something that your hands do naturally? And just a word of caution, this is not something that I would say to like someone who's just starting out, beginning, trying to get scale, like the scales under their fingers and stuff. This is some, if you can already play pretty well, it's might be time to start thinking about throwing out some of other people's stuff and playing your own stuff. So that is tip number 2. Tip number 3 for legato technique is one that I have just very recently discovered. I was trying to play something very fast, like 300 beats per minute, and it's always been a struggle for me. And furthermore, I've always liked this sound, this very defined sound between notes. It sounds like this. It's kind of like a pop when the string hits the fret. And I had always just figured that pop happened because you had to press really hard. So I always pressed really hard with my fingers. And there was lots of tension. Like if you had felt between my thumb and the back of the neck, you would have felt me pressing very, very hard. What I realized just recently is that you can actually get just as good of a pop hardly pressing at all, like pressing very, very soft. What's important is that your finger was moving fast as it attacks the string, so you have to have these fast movements. But I think a huge mistake a lot of people make is pressing too hard. When I started messing with this now, I hardly feel like I'm pressing at all, actually. It's like My finger is almost just floating around above the strings and moving very quickly and tapping each one. But there's really hardly any pressure that I'm actually pushing down on the neck. And it's increased my speed by, I think, about 30 beats per minute just in the past couple days, which is really amazing. I'm really happy with that improvement, which is actually the reason that I thought to make this video. So I'll play a little bit for you. I'm not sure if you can really tell how hard I'm pressing, but just to give you an idea of the sound I'm getting. So that's hardly pressing at all. Like, there's very little tension. There's very little pressure between my thumb and the back of the guitar. I'm just focusing on having my fingers do very quick movements and not pressing the guitar neck very hard at all. That is about all I have for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope it affects your legato playing. And please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this. And I will see you guys next time.